Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the sport where we've got a lot to talk about. I think this weekend for me, like on a personal level, has been quite hard emotionally. For any number of reasons, but the high level ones, obviously with what happened on Friday with Courts, that was quite hard. And it was hard because I had to watch him go through it. And don't forget, Courtney's cornered by guys I consider to be friends in Raf and Don. So I also worry about them. Do you know what I mean? Like, we've all known each other directly or indirectly for over a decade. And in boxing, that's a long time. And remember, there've been no falling outs. A decade in boxing and no fallouts is something special, I promise you. So it's been rough. But luckily, I think we're all kind of out the other side and we know what we want to do next. Individually, collectively, I think there's a path to improvement, and that's always good. Then I get to watch Saturday, and Saturday was the first time I realized it's the beginning of the end for what I call like my era of boxing. So kids that were in the gyms kind of when I was starting to build my name. And that kind of makes me feel old in this game too. So now they're coming to the end of their kind of peak cycle. And, from being world title challengers and contenders, they're now getting to the point where they're looking for money fights or, they might become the name that someone uses to elevate themselves. And, that's also quite hard to take emotionally because it's not that long ago we were talking about, going to Vegas and latterly going to Saudi. And now it's more like, well, we just got to see what the opportunities are. So it's been quite emotional, but I think it raises some really interesting talking points about where boxing is right now. So for me, it's only fair that we start with the main event from Saturday. Ohara Davies and Adam Azim, which is a hard fight to watch, obviously, because if you think about those two, like as was said in the media, they've known each other a long time. And if you're Ohara, you kind of thought that you would be gone before Adam Azim got to a position to challenge you. So this fight it's personally uncomfortable, but from a business perspective, fully understandable, right? I said at the time, I thought it was a bit early for us to be talking about Ohara Davies as a name you just step over to get somewhere. I didn't think that was fair, and I still don't think that's fair. But if people were aware that it was his last fight, and so, as they say in wrestling, he decided to drop the strap, fair enough to him. If you're going to put Adam Azim over a kid that massive respect to that. But I think he went into that fight fully expecting to win. His team thought he would win. So I think he just found when you don't love this game, it's very hard to do. Very, very hard to do. You can do the training. You can hit your numbers. You can do the camp. You can do your sparring. You can be in the gym because the gyms are home from home. But fight night requires a very different animal. An animal is actually the word. And so when I watched Ohara Davies versus Adam Azim, the first thing I said was, Ohara is looking at who he was in 2014, 2015. That's who he's fighting. He's fighting a kid who's sharp, who's fast, who's got the whole world ahead of him. All the possibilities are there for him. And he's got the engine of the machine behind him. Ohara Davies was in that place before. And so OD's watching this, and as he's taking jab after jab, right hand after right hand, he's realizing, I'm not that guy anymore. Yep, he is. And I think you heard him say it numerous times through the nose that was maybe broken, but definitely damaged. And as he was struggling to breathe, you can hear him, and he's like, I don't love it anymore. And he fought like a guy that didn't love it anymore. Like, I don't know how far back people go with Ohara Davies, but O'Hara's default was just to set about you, use that unbelievably long jab, and then just rip into you. And it wasn't always the most elegant of styles, and it didn't need to be, but it was effective. And it allowed him to overperform. I'm going to say that again. It allowed him to overperform because he did things that a kid of his experience shouldn't have been doing. That's all down to him. Drive, determination, just that passion for the sport to set about people. You can't manufacture that. You can't fake it. You either have it or you don't. And that kid had it in spades. So here's the thing about O'Hara Davis. And he'll always be a polarizing figure because people will judge him without knowing him and without understanding him. But they will judge him because of what they've been told. And I think we have a lot of this in life. It's not just a boxing thing, it's a life thing. It's what they call it, it's that principle of anchorage. Once I tell you who someone is, if you believe my opinion, you will never see past that view. So once you start to hear O'Hara Davis is a gobshite, I think that's what they say up north, right? He's a gobshite. Then people up north just didn't like him. No research required. They didn't like him. And so the more they didn't like him, the more he didn't care because people didn't really understand this about O'Hara Davis. O'Hara Davis is a kid from Hackney. Yeah. In many situations, adversity can be fatal. So you can't be nice about it. You can't be humble about adversity. You can't be magnanimous about adversity because you're raised in an environment where people die in adversity. And that's not a joke. You don't believe me? Look how many times the far right have to tweet about things going on in East London and they tell you this isn't the Britain they know. This is the Britain I know. Being Hackney born and proud of it, I fully understand that. So he was always on a hiding to nothing because here's a kid who's thrust into the spotlight because of the momentum he built himself. And no one smartened him up. No one explained how this game works. No one explained to him, look, it's about perception. It is because once the perception's with you, it will never leave you. No one did because they wanted to use his energy for their own ends. O'Hara's a great kid. He's a really good kid. Brilliant, brilliant young man. And I judge people by how they are when they're in my gym, right? You know what I mean? Like, I like people who come into a gym and they're respectful. Not only they're respectful, but they're good energy in the gym. And I remember O'Hara would come down, just pop down. And he was just class, man. Like, you wouldn't know he was there. He was sat chilling. He'd watch the sparring. He'd have a little laugh and a joke with people, shake hands, talk, all of that good stuff. And he was just a credit, man. He was a credit to himself. And he never stopped being that person. You'd see him at shows, same guy. Anyone that's seen O'Hara Davis at a show knows he just sits there with his friends or he just sits watching the boxing. He'll share a few views, nothing controversial, never involved in drama. But he was used as a plaything. And we know who used him as a plaything because they'd say to him, look, we need you to wind up these people. Like, there's loads of people out there. We need you to wind them up so they tune in. And so he's going to do what's asked of him, right? But he's going to do it in the way that he knows, being from East London. He's going to go all the way in. No one tried to smarten up and say, oh, D, we just need a couple of quick lines. Don't go too hard on him. Just be nice, but just poke him a little bit and then we'll get you off stage. It was never that. They allowed him to do all of this stuff. And then when it went too far, we remember, right? The Hillsborough tweet. Well, was it the Hillsborough tweet or the Sun tweet? Excuse me. It was the Sun tweet. We remember that. And how no one tried to ascertain the facts. A decision was made to get rid of him. He's suspended from the Sims gym. Matchroom suspended him. They've never given a proper reason, by the way. Hearn just said, it's my company, I can do what I want. I know for absolute certain O'Hara had no idea what Hillsborough was. Zero idea. But people wanted to be offended it was O'Hara Davis. There's a stick to beat him with. And that was the incident that told me Eddie Hearn doesn't really run Matchroom. There are other people who can pull his chain. Whether that's because they've got money in Matchroom, I don't know. Whether it's because they provide his protection, I don't know. But I don't think Brentwood School educated Edward Hearn. I don't believe Eddie Hills or Billericay. I don't believe the guy with the hair up front but nothing up top. I don't believe that guy would have got rid of O'Hara Davis. It was too much money. But then Eddie Hearn became like everyone else in O'Hara's life that had abandoned him. I don't know if he ever got over that heartbreak because Matchroom was like a home to him. He definitely wanted to spend his whole career there. And that's a real shame. But The O'Hara Davis I know. He's a quite considered guy. Don't think he's got any real vices, nothing. Just his own man in his own space. That's who he is. Just a guy who loved boxing. A guy who found his identity, found his voice, found his spirit in boxing. And it's just a shame that not enough of boxing loved him back. Because we can debate who was the first boxer on Twitter. We can do all these other things. Who was the first person on this platform or that platform? Nobody did it better than O'Hara, Anthony Yarde, and young Otto. Nobody. The stamina for sale days, the trad TKO days, the Tunde Ajayi no days off t-shirt days. No one was on social media like they were. I can tell you this for absolute certain. Guys like Joshua were going to them like, right, I love what you guys are doing on social media. No one was at their level. There may have been people on social media, 100%. I was, you probably were. No one was at that level where we were getting, for the first time, I think, we were getting consistent sparring content from boxers. These kids went to the Mayweather gym. You hear the stories about them sharing subways because they had like $5 or $7 a day to live on out there, but they needed to make it happen. All of these things that were happening for these guys, they made going to the Mayweather gym cool. Who was going there before? And then you saw Mickey Elliott would take his guys there. They made going out that way good, like en masse. And I know other clubs have done like boxing tours, but just to go out there and announce yourself. Never forget they had Otto, or as you guys know him, Junior Saba. They had him all lined up to fight on Mayweather's undercard against Pacquiao. How? And that was all off Tunde, Anthony Yarde, O'Hara Davis, and Otto's work. We forget how important those guys were to boxing in terms of they showed other boxers what was possible. And everything you see now is a derivative of something that that group did. Everything now. And I'm not saying that they created beef, but these, like all that, the IFL headlines, all of that, it comes from these guys. Eddie Hearn's energy comes from these guys because they showed that conflict drove numbers. They were the first guys to show what worked on social media. So when people say, how will you remember O'Hara Davis? I'll remember O'Hara Davis as a good amateur, a decent pro, but part of one of the most innovative groups we've had in British boxing. Yeah, that early Stamina for Sale group forced everyone to level up. And then you've also got to thank Tony Sese, and I'm glad O'Hara Davis mentioned him because you see Tony Sese, he is the foundational coach of East London and probably London boxing in a lot of ways. Now, what I mean by foundational coach is he's the guy that if you start training with Tony when you're 10, 11 years old, you'll never go wrong as an amateur. He works you so hard, he gets you into all the right disciplines early enough. Where I see most people, they're coaching kids like they're social workers or they're therapists. He coaches them. He says, guys, this is what boxing's about. You may as well learn it now. So I'm glad that Tony gets his flowers because lovely guy. And his record of achievement is beyond question. But I'd like to just snap back and talk about that fight because you got to remember, O'Hara Davis is no mug. Could you put O'Hara in with Jack Catterall and he'd be competitive? 100%. Could you put O'Hara Davis in with Regis Prograis and he'd be competitive? 100%. So what you saw Adam Azim do was special. That's the kid announcing himself. Okay, he's not the greatest talker, but he does his talking in the ring, where it counts. And he's fast. He's fast and he's so agile, we still don't know if he can take a proper shot yet because he can get out the way so well. You look at him and you go, there's a lot to like. The low left hand, as he moves up the levels, I don't know if he'll get away with that, but for now he's going to get away with it. But everything else, you could see Shane's. I don't think Shane's added much, and that's no disrespect to Shane. I mean, from a technical perspective, Adam and his brother could do it all at Pinewood Star, and so to give the pro coach's credit is to disrespect the guys at Pinewood Star. And my argument for that is simply there are more Adam Azims from their past, and there'll be more Adam Azims in their future. So you got to give credit to Pinewood Star for creating and nurturing that talent. That's the first thing. What Shane has done is he's reduced the error count. So Adam Azim makes very few mistakes. And when you're a coach, that's the most frustrating thing when you're planning for an opponent. You're like, he doesn't make many mistakes. And when he does, his feet and his reflexes are so quick, you can't even capitalize. And that's what O'Hara was finding. You know, like when you prepare for a guy like Barroso is not that dynamic, not that fast. No chance. Barroso's a bit like, look, I'm an old guy. I'm just going to do enough to win. You know, I'm going to try and old man my way through rounds. Adam Azim was like, no, I've got energy to burn, mate. Let's have this. And O'Hara found he didn't have that. So credit to Adam Azim, because I think now he's at that point where stuff like British titles, you're kind of looking past that. And I'm not saying you're looking past world titles, but you are looking at a situation where you're like, right, do you think Adam Azim could jump in with Jack Catterall at the moment? No. And you can't, you can never disrespect the value of experience and having been there and been under pressure. You know, like Jack's been there. He's been in the controversial spaces in terms of, you know, did he really beat O'Hara or not? Those sorts of things. But he's definitely in that conversation for Dalton Smith. And Dalton's no mug, by the way. I think Dalton's supremely talented, supremely skilled. What he's not is a gnarly old veteran. And that's what Adam needs to avoid, are the gnarly old veterans who can kid their way through rounds, right? He just needs guys where he can build a name for himself while he's figuring out how to deal with those older, awkward, kind of more seasoned campaigners. But his potential is limitless. If his chin holds up, and you hear me say this a lot, because this is the important thing, if his chin holds up, if he can hold a shot, in this phase of his career, it's going to be very, very hard to beat. But hopefully he's understanding that this phase of his career doesn't last forever. You're not going to be faster than everyone forever. You know, look, O'Hara's finding that out, or he found that out. So at some point, you've got to work on your fundamentals and make sure that when you do start to slow down, you've still got weapons that make you dangerous. And I'm sure he will. He's in the right camp to be figuring these things out. So the next fight I want to look at was Michael McKinson versus Tonali Mbengue. Wow. Odd matchmaking. That's why I classed that. That was really, really strange matchmaking. Well, maybe it wasn't if you wanted to find out how good Michael McKinson was, but I never thought McKinson could win that fight, and here's why. Like, Mbengue's been in with good people, and he's usually acquitted himself well, right? There's that factor. The second factor people don't talk about is altitude. This guy trains at altitude. He lives at altitude. He lives at about, because he's in South Africa, so he could be living at up to 5,000 feet above sea level on the regs. So he's never going to have an engine problem in the UK. Never going to have an engine problem if he ran it. It's the equivalent of natural blood doping, right? You just naturally have more red blood cells because you're at altitude. So you come down here, you're like, oh, man, dude, 12 rounds stood on my head. And I don't think that was considered. Because if you look at how the fight went, the first 3 rounds, McKinson was a jack in the box. You know, jab, drop, back up, straight left, back down again, big right hook. He was bouncing all over the place. And in my head, I was like, I don't know if you can do that for 12 rounds. But I felt confident Mbengue would do the 12 rounds. Just because, like, being Southern African, I know what stamina is like. And what happened throughout the fight is McKinson was looking for Hollywood moments. Mbengue just stayed consistent. Touched him. When the opening came, he took it. And that's experience for you. But there's only 3 years between them. So why McKinson has no ring craft, and this is the problem in British boxing, we don't have ring craft. So we don't think of a fight as like a whole, like in football, you think about a 90-minute game of football, right? Rugby's an 80-minute game. And you plan for that. So you understand that you can't just shoot your load in the first 20 minutes because there might be another 60 to go. And those last 20 are going to be rough for you, you know? And it's true. In football, you don't want to be defending too much because it's tiring. In rugby, you don't want to be tackling too much because it's tiring. And you plan for these things. And I feel in British boxing, we don't plan for these things. So we don't go, well, look, if we're going to go 12 rounds, maybe be a bit more circumspect, right? Let's find ways to actually, do damage efficiently over 12 rounds. And McKinson was just going like he thought he could stop this guy. Now, I don't know what they were telling him in camp, but you weren't going to stop him. He's tough as anything. And like I said, that high red blood cell count, the stamina, all that stuff helps give you a chin, or a punch resistance, I should say. And so he was just got exposed and just progressively broken down. That's the only way you can describe what was happening in that fight. He was just getting broken down round after round, just getting walked down. Mbengue just there, just hooks to the body, touching the head, all of that stuff that, veterans do. Let me just keep the pressure on him so he has to keep defending. He doesn't like doing that. And once he's sussed up that McKinson doesn't like retreating or defending, just start to grind him down. And that was a deserved win. Now, what you do with him next, that's an interesting question. Do you put him in with a Chris Kongo? I wonder, because they'd have a common opponent, wouldn't they? Sebastian Formella. So I wonder if you put him in with a Chris Kongo and say, all right, Chris, let's see what you've got now. Let's see if you're the guy that can take this on. Or do you actually have him as your fighter, though he's 33? Is Chris that much younger? Wow, we're really touching on this theme of end of an era, aren't we, on the show? But Chris might also be of that age as well. So overall, McKinson can come back, but I think we now know that McKinson, British level, you could whack him in with a guy like Echo Esserman. I guess I don't even think he'd be guaranteed to win that, because Echo Esserman is another guy with a high work rate and will grind you down if he has to. I'm just going to group the two women's fights together, just because it's easier. First, Shannon Courtney. I don't know what you say to Shannon Courtney. Like I said, I've never been on here and told people they need to retire. But I don't understand why you would come in 10 pounds heavier than your traditional fight weight. And even at that traditional fight weight, you still carried a bit of excess, I should say. And at 128, it looked like you haven't even tried to make weight. That was the worrying thing for me about Shannon Courtney, was she didn't. But maybe she needed to fight at that weight just because she needed to fight. I don't know. I think that's her story to tell. But if you're looking at it from just a purely boxing perspective, she's never a featherweight. She's never a super feather. In the amateurs, when she was boxing at 57, which is kind of that featherweight sort of region, she struggled because she had body fat at 57 kilograms, and that's not a bad thing. But she was up against women that didn't. So in terms of actual in-ring weight, she was being outweighed. I reckon she was being outweighed by 6 or 7 pounds in many cases because of the extra she carried. And she was still game, and she was brave, and she was a grafter. Shannon Courtney was a grafter, and someone who's got no quit in her. All these things are good things about Shannon Courtney. There's loads of stuff outside the ring that people find disagreeable. That's up to them. But she's as game as they come. Now, whether she can hook it all up and get down to bantamweight to be competitive, I don't know. I hope she can. Because there are loads of fights we'd watch her have. I'd watch her fight Ebony Bridges again. I'd watch her fight Francesca Hennessy. I'd watch her fight all of these people. But that defeat on Saturday, do you know what I mean? Like, that defeat on Saturday, when she lost to Ramos, that wasn't good. That really, really wasn't good. So I don't know, but the being in Liverpool thing hasn't worked. Changing trainers, that hasn't worked. Surprise, surprise. No, her journey is personal, it's internal. Maybe she needs to come back home and just rebuild down here. But good luck to her. Like I said, for me, Shannon Courtney's always been a grafter. Hard to say kick her out of boxing, because I don't think she's done much wrong other than not be as good as maybe others were telling us she was. In terms of Francesca Hennessy, I still don't know. In the oddest bit of matchmaking, they put Francesca Hennessy in with essentially the super bantamweight version of the Hulk. What was her surname? Mariah. That woman had she had those gorilla jaw muscles that bulge out at the sides. And you're like, how? And at the weigh-in, she looked stupidly ripped. Like, I was like, yo, the Olympia wasn't that long ago. She probably could have stood on stage at the Olympia. And then when she weighed in, like when they fought, it literally, I was going to say it was man against boy, and I know people are going to start sniggering at that, but it looked like there was 2 weight classes between them. So credit to Francesca Hennessy, credit to her corner for navigating her through that fight, because she was massively overpowered, out-muscled in there, but she stuck to her boxing. Brad Skeet looks like he's got a good future as a coach. One niggle, maybe he just needs to say less in the corners. He's got all the right ideas, just a whole heap of words coming out though. But he's learning. But look, his ideas are all spot on. I think just from what I'm hearing, he's going to turn out to be a good trainer. Be good to see him back at Earlsfield, carry some of the load that other people are, shirking at the moment. But yeah, I still don't know where I sit on Francesca Hennessy, because I don't know where I sit on this nepotism in boxing thing. On one hand, we accept it in every other industry, so should we accept it in boxing? Because sometimes we do, right? There's some people who we accept, it's nepotism, that's how you got your deal. You're seeing what Crawler's doing at his side. Who else? The Smith brothers, it's nepotism. Conor Benn, Eubank Jr., Harlem Eubank, like anyone with Eubank or Ben, the Eubank son that isn't really invited to the Christmas do. So there are loads of people involved in boxing who are legacies, right? But we pick and choose who our enemies are. And it's not even based on whether they've earned it or not. It's literally just based on who the media tell you to like and dislike. But I don't know how I feel about that, because I'd like boxing to be a meritocracy. You should be on a show because you're capable. Now, here's where I have the issue. I can't watch Francesca Hennessy on Sky Sports knowing that Emma Dolan is not on Sky Sports. Those two things don't make any sense to me. Now, Emma Dolan is a grafter. She's worked her way through the system. I am surprised that we don't see her on TV. And it can't be a ticket thing, because I don't believe Francesca Hennessy has to sell tickets. So that's my issue with it. If I could say Francesca Hennessy was a standout, and there's no question she should be there, I would. But the other Hennessy was on there, and he wasn't built for boxing. And we knew that from the start. So someone has to answer me that question. Why are they getting involved? And look, I'm not, like I said, I don't know where I sit on this discussion, but there can't be a Francesca Hennessy on Sky Sports and no Emma Dolan. That's what I'd argue. And hopefully people understand where I'm coming from. But it's another win for Francesca Hennessy, and I'm not, don't rush her. She's only 19, Otherwise, you're going to have to keep digging up these ex-bodybuilders who have turned to boxing, and I don't think that's going to be good for her long-term health. Like, she can get away with it for so long, but her face looked, pretty gnarly at the end of that fight. She knew she'd been in a fight. And I think the job of a promoter is to protect your prospects till the right time. Like, let's not keep putting people in the fire. They did this with Eddie Scotney, who had a similar situation. And yeah, your skills will get you some way, but eventually you're going to meet someone that figures it out, and they'd have ingested whatever. And then there's going to be a problem, right? But I was surprised that woman was allowed to weigh in, and UCAD didn't think twice about testing her. Do you know what I mean? As someone said to me the other day, full trousers down job. Wow. Where next? Let's talk about Jamie TKV. Fought Frank Ignatius for the right to fight for the English title, right? No idea who holds that. I want to say Solomon Dacus holds it, but I can't even think who holds it right now. So Jamie fights Frank Ignatius. These two guys, it's London, so they know each other, right? And there's a degree of familiarity. Now, the thing is, if you've sparred Jamie before, if he's had you up in sparring before, you don't really want to be fighting him in 10-ounce gloves, because you're going to feel every shot. And that was kind of... There's a way Jamie boxes, right? And it is just maul and brawl. Like, if you're not strong enough to keep him off, if you're not sharp enough to keep him off, if you don't have the skills to handle Jamie, he's going to shove you from one side of the ring to the other, and he's just going to keep breaking you down, and you're not going to be able to ride that out for 12 rounds. It's not possible. And that's what he did to Frank Ignatius. Just ground him down. Now, me knowing Jamie like I do, I feel he's a bit looser with his punches now in terms of like, they're all over the place. I think he could tighten that up a little bit and work his hips a lot more. Does he need to carry the weight that he does? I always ask him that question, but it never seems to stop him. He never seems to run out of energy. He just has to increase that punch speed, because when he does that, it creates a sense of terror. And that's when he's like at his nastiest, when he's just shooting in off a jab, right hook, right uppercut, left hook, straight right uppercut again. And he'll hit you 10 times before like he decides to give you a rest. And part of me is like, is he, of all of this generation of heavyweights, is he the sleeper? And the reason I say that is, if you look at him on paper, not the most powerful, maybe not the strongest, not the most ripped, not the most, but I don't believe there's anyone who has an approach to boxing that is that hard to deal with like he does. Like, he will maul people in sparring. But here's the thing, right? When he needs to showboat and make you look stupid, he will showboat and make you look stupid as well. So that will be interesting. One of the crazy things is, I was thinking about this on Saturday. If they'd made Courtney Bennett versus Jamie TKV for the Southern area and use that as an eliminator for the English, would have been a far easier fight for Courts, weirdly enough. But I also think if Jamie fought Nick Webb, he would handle Nick Webb. And it just goes to show, man, styles make fights. Styles and history make fights. I was hearing rumors that Moses Hitalma splattered Frank Ignatius. And that's what was being referred to when they were talking to each other. And Jamie's like, oh, you had a bad run-in not long ago. Hope everything's good with you. And that was what they were talking about. I was like, yeah, you got your backside handed to you by one of my teammates. So now you know it's my turn and you know what I do. And they were just really trying to get in his head. I think the plan was to get Moses Hitalma to come into the ring first, just have him stare out Frank Ignatius and have Jamie come. They had all this stuff planned out, I imagine. But Jamie will now fight for the English. Who he fights, don't know. But whoever it is won't fancy the assignment. I think Jamie's horrible to deal with. And I speak as someone that's been on the other side of it. Horrible to deal with. But one of my favorite people in boxing. The same stuff I said about O'Hara Davis, you can say about Jamie TKV. The guy's a pro, will still go to amateur shows, will hand out trophies, will do whatever he has to do, will give advice, will help all the time. He's one of those really good eggs in boxing. So I'm going to crunch two fights into one, just because they are what they are. Sam Hickey makes his Sky Sports debut. I think he was Commonwealth gold medalist, and then his career kind of meandered after that, probably trying for the Olympics. Probably unlikely to have happened, but made his debut. He's 1-0 now. I'm just not sold on this generation. This kind of post Anthony Fowler and pre kind of guys like Teen Stott and Leo Atang. There's this gap here where they're not very good, and we'll come onto the GB system later. But yeah, I'm not overly sold on their future. And then Anthony Yarde fought Ralph Vilkans. Guess it was just Christmas money. That was just one of those Christmas money fights where Yarde was probably of the view that I need rounds, and I need to lull people into believing I'm not very good. And so it looked like he did enough to win. It felt like he was coasting a bit. And we still have no clarity on the Buatsi fight. So what was the point in having Yarde on that show? I'm baffled, right? Someone explain this to me. You get Anthony Yarde on a one-fight deal. To do what exactly? To tell us what he's already told us. I'll fight anyone. And Buatsi like, yeah, I'll fight anyone. I genuinely thought Ben had got him on there. Like, look, let's do a one-fight deal. You beat your guy. We get Josh in the ring. We agree that this fight's going to happen. Like, what's the barrier? If Yarde's a free agent, like he says, and Boatsy signed to box, that fight should have been agreed. Why is it not agreed? That's what I don't understand. So it just felt, that's why I say it felt like a Christmas money fight, because Yarde showed up, got paid, left. Gave him nothing more than they had before he fought. And Josh was just, in an era where Turkey's making these fights happen at the drop of a hat, like, we don't need to be dragging nonsense out. Like, no one's got the attention span for that anymore. We will quickly move on to the next thing. And once again, those guys will lose the opportunity of a payday. The Yarde-Boatsy fight needs to happen next for both of them. Because like, you can't guarantee that they're going to keep winning. And once one of them loses, that's a whole load of money gone. You know, we saw this with Fury. Like, who really wants to see Fury Joshua now? Like, there'll be a few weirdos who want to see it for weird reasons, but it's not going to be a spectacle because both guys are shop worn, and both guys, it turns out, aren't what we thought they were. So can we talk about Dan Azeez finally? So Dan fights Louis Edmondson for the British and Commonwealth titles. Now, I always felt this was a bait and switch, right? So you sell it to the public like chance for Dan to go and get his Lonsdale belt outright. And I always had a feeling that they would Judas him in this one. So we can all agree that that didn't feel like a majority decision fight for Louis Edmondson, right? And let me be very clear about this. I'm happy for Louis, right? That's a kid who's been boxing God knows how long, since he was 9, 10 years old, right? So over 20 years in the game, and he's got a British title. And you shouldn't begrudge anyone a British title, because a lot of kids dream of winning that. And he's won one, so fair play to him. And if you think Louis won, you think Louis won. I just don't. I don't. And also, I just think, from a boxing perspective, that's kind of not the product we want to put out to the masses, right? What did he get pinged for? He lost a point for low blows, if I'm correct. But he never lost a point for holding, which he should have done, because he was permanently holding, right? He was just holding continuously. And it was almost like they said, Louis, don't get stopped and you'll be all right. And it was on Dan to take out the judge's hands if he wanted those belts. I don't think Dan was ever going to get the decision. I just don't. And my theory on it is this, and I've felt this for a while, and when people said to me, Liam Cameron should fight Ben Whittaker next, they should do the rematch, it's the right thing to do, and I kept saying to people, they won't do the rematch. Because commercially, it doesn't really aid Sky. It's almost just like, it's a bit of admin, it's a bit of accounting, housekeeping, right? Like, yeah, just get the win over him and let's move on. So that doesn't make any sense, considering the risk that's on the other side of that fight. So I always felt that they'd find a way to get Ben into a British title fight without having to take on a killer. And Louis Edmondson's a good boxer, he's a good technician, but he's not a killer. He might be a year older than Ben. He must be a year or so older than Ben. So they would have come up the same kind of time, like you're boxing on the same junior shows, you know, in terms of championships and stuff. So they know each other. I don't think there's anything Louis Edmondson, Ben Whittaker would be scared of right now. Like, Louis hasn't had enough pro fights to be that guy. So now we have a situation where Ben Whittaker, Ben Shalom, and Sky Sports can tell you, look, we know you want to see the Liam Cameron rematch, but we've just been offered a great opportunity to fight for the British. Now, how you engineer that, you probably give Ben like a tune-up, where 6-round knockover, and then you say, right, put Ben in the British title picture. No shame in this, by the way. This is how the game works, right? Because there's a lot of money invested in Ben. So they need to give you, a good deal. What's the expression? The only thing better than a good deal is a better deal. So if we now say, okay, you're not going to get the Liam Cameron fight yet, but we're going to give you Ben Whittaker against Louis Edmondson for the British. And maybe the Commonwealth too. And remember, those two already have needle, and there was demand for the public. The public was saying, why doesn't Ben fight Louis Edmondson? You'll get that fight. And that achieves another aim. It cements Sky and Boxer's position on that South Coast. Right? So you can now have a situation on the South Coast where you're having big fights, and it's not just Chris Billum Smith. Now, this is going to be a big fight as well. And maybe that's a strategic goal. But I always felt that they'd find a way to get Ben those belts without having to fight Josh, Dan, Spider, or anyone like that. And then once they've got the belts, they can decide where to go next. But Ben Whittaker winning the British title in under 10 fights, now you start to market him as a superstar. And you can layer it in by saying, look, David Haye lost to Carl Thompson. Look what he went on to do. Ben just had a minor setback here. Just see what he goes on and does. There's loads of this stuff to do. And I feel that's where you're going to see this go. I think you're going to see Whittaker versus Edmondson for the British, if Louis can hold on to that belt. And then they'll just build Ben that way. Nothing wrong with that at all. That's just how boxing works. But I want to come back to Dan. A year ago, 1 year ago, and it was about this time, I asked Dan, what are you actually doing right now? You're European champion. You just fought an 8-rounder in Italy. What are you really doing right now? And we spoke, and Dan was like, Dan's like, nah, it's all good, man. I know what's happening. It's all good. And I said to Dan, if you don't get them to commit to a world title for you, you got to really look at your options, because they're going to feed you to people. You're just going to get used from this point, because once you win the European, if you don't fight for a world title, then you know that they just fattened you up to feed to somebody. And what was his next fight after that Italian show? Buatsi. And they kept him on ice. They didn't let him stay active. They didn't let him have a tune-up. He fought Buatsi. Right? That's crazy, isn't it? He fought Buatsi. So he'd just been sat on the shelf for a minute. And then he fights Josh. That doesn't go as planned. Then he fights a Croatian guy. Was it Sepp? Doesn't go as planned. And he fights Louis Edmondson. Doesn't go as planned. The trend can be your friend or can be your enemy, man. But it wasn't looking good. After the Sepp fight, I said, they need to just give this guy someone easy. Give him a Joel McIntyre. Let Dan just kind of get his mojo back, work on a few things, rediscover the old Dan. And they refuse to do that. And boxing fans will say, look, once you get to a certain level, you shouldn't drop down. You should, because you got to let the body heal. You got to let the body rest. And you get no other opportunity to work on things with live bullets coming back at you. So sometimes you do need an easier fight. And if you look at most boxers' careers, they have them, even at the top level. Dan Aziz is a friend. We were sat at amateur shows 10, 11, 12 years ago. I'd nudge him and say, when are you going to come and take boxing seriously and box in the Southeast Divs? And he'd laugh and go, nah, Essex is fine for me, thanks. We'd have all these kind of laughs and jokes, and we've kind of come along and we've sat and we've always talked about the pro stuff, even before Dan was close to turning over. And I remember we talk about how everyone's career went wrong when they abandoned their day ones. Everyone's career went wrong. I remember him going, I'll never do that. I remember that. And then I remember when he won against Hosea Burton, and everything changed. It was taking Dan a little longer to respond to messages. He wasn't picking his phone up. He wasn't calling back. And you'd see him at all of these places with people you didn't know. I'm like, who the hell are these people? And I'd just be watching, and I knew what was coming. And I was like, he hasn't got anyone around him that's the custodian of his dream. None of the people that were there, because remember, there are photographs everywhere of us. None of those people in those photographs are in the photographs now. And it's not a question of, well, these guys didn't level up, so Dan left them behind. It's not that. They've all kind of leveled up we've all leveled up in our own way. We've all done our own thing. But what happens when you leave those people is you lose the reminders. You lose the reminders of what you promised yourself on the way up. And I'll contrast that with Spider. If you look at Craig Richards, his circle has never really changed. Like, you rarely see Craig at anything. Like, Craig's not I need to be seen out and about kind of person. Like, you might bump into Craig in Croydon or somewhere. You might bump into him and clap him on a night out. Rarely, though. But Craig's kind of kept the same people around him. Do you see what I mean? Like, Joshua's kind of kept the same people around him. Yeah, he changed trainers, but look at his photographs. It's the same people. Fury's kind of kept the same people around him too. And so this is really important, because when Dan got to that point after the European title, I knew what was coming. You're going up or you're going down. I knew that for absolute certain. And I also knew Sky didn't have the money to make the fights that Dan deserved. So Dan was caught in this horrible situation. Nothing was going to derail Undisputed. And however long it took for Undisputed to happen, cool. A year, 18 months. And as it turned out, it took about a year for it to happen. Now we've got the rematch. So really those belts might be out of commission till next summer. What was Dan meant to do until then? Who does Dan fight until then? You were just treading water waiting for a world title shot. And so Sky weren't going to spend money to keep him at the level that he should have been. And nor were they prepared to pay him to fight a lesser guy. And so it's like, right, we've got to use him to build Josh up. We've got to use him to try and get the belt onto Ben Whittaker. All that sort of stuff starts to happen. Dan then becomes a tool for other things. Now, I can't say that would have happened if I'd been closer to the action. I don't know. I'd like to feel I would have said something. But I think the way that he's been promoted since he won that European title has been dog shit. No one can give me a valid excuse of why he's been treated that way. Dan was the people's champion. Here's a guy that went Southern area, Charlie Duffield. English, Andre Sterling. British, Hosea Burton. European, Thomas Four. Right? He's done the levels. And so fans are like, we want to see the story end the right way. And Sky and Boxer went, no, we're not doing that. And after that, there was nowhere else to go. And that's when you need strong advocacy. You need someone to say, no, you can't use him. Go and find someone else to use. Yeah? Just look after Dan because he's still got good fights in him. And so we are where we are. The Buddy McGirt thing, I think I said it at the time. I don't understand why people would go there. I always felt that Buddy McGirt's gift was to state the obvious in an American accent. That was his gift. Just state the really bloody obvious with an American accent. That was all. I don't think he gave Dan Aziz anything. Remember, one fight there was a cross-arm block, then there wasn't. One fight it was about inside fighting, then it was about keeping it long. And I don't blame Buddy McGirt, by the way, because I just don't believe Buddy McGirt knows Dan Aziz. He hasn't got the years and years of watching Dan fight. He hasn't got that experience of being around Dan and knowing when Dan's up and when Dan's down and when Dan's confident, when he's nervous. Dan is always going to be nervous in a rematch. If Dan's fought someone in his past, he's always going to overthink it, overanalyze and try too hard and deviate from what he's naturally good at. There was a kid called Ashley Vanzi. I think Dan might have fought him 3 times, couldn't beat him. But Dan had the tools to beat him. But once that first defeat came through, it got to Dan. And I think that's what happened with Louis Edmondson. I think that's what happened with Joshua Buatsi. And I was nervous that would have happened with Matthew Tinker. I'm just speaking from the heart here. But I know Dan. So this is what I mean about you got to keep your day ones next to you. Because then they're the guys that can say to Buddy, look, Buddy, yeah, you're taking him into a fight with Joshua Buatsi. Yeah. Dan Aziz doesn't need a tactical plan, really. The tactics are really simple. You throw more punches than him and you win. Done. What punches? Doesn't even matter. He's open for everything. Done. The work comes with convincing Dan Aziz Joshua Buatsi is just another opponent. That's the work of a real coach. When you understand your fighter, you understand your job is to convince him that that's just another opponent. changes the performance entirely. Buddy couldn't do that. He didn't have the knowledge. You can go to these gyms and there can be Larry Eckendyer, who I don't even think has that knowledge either. And Larry's a good guy. Larry knows his boxing. But I always had the feeling that Dan was looking for something that was already there in his circle, you know. And he knows that. Dan could have rung anyone, could have rung me, could have rung Martin Bowers before Buddy McGirt. All people who know Dan. And he would have been fine. But instead, he went through the expense of getting Buddy McGirt in to realize there's nothing he can deliver that no one else can. And I'm just saying, this is me as an outsider looking in. Dan hasn't really told me much about this. But I always felt the Buddy McGirt thing was a disgrace. It's not a disgrace, a mistake. I always felt it was a mistake. It didn't make sense. He wasn't going to add anything. All Dan needed was someone to simplify his boxing approach and get his mind right. And that's how you unleash the monster in Dan. And so you look at where Dan Aziz is now, and you go, what do you do next if you're Dan? World titles are tied up until probably next summer, unless Beterbiev says, I'm done now, I'm going to vacate, and then everything's back in play. But I'd like to see at least an attempt to get Dan close to that title picture. Because he deserves to fight for a world title. Now, whether you think he's going to win one or not, different discussion, but he deserves to fight for a world title because he's given the British boxing fans what they wanted. Mate, you fight whoever's put in front of you. And he did that. Right? Dan did that. But the lesson, I think, from what I'm saying here is, if you want to build a professional career as a boxer, you don't have to have all of your people from day one with you, but you got to have the ones whose opinion you respect there. And whenever something happens, you get a second opinion. Otherwise, you end up signing stupid deals for stupid money and stupid opportunities. And it's not just, this is broadly, this is everyone in boxing. I've seen some terrible deals that happen because no one said, actually, do you know what? Before I sign this, I'm going to go home and read it. And then I want to call someone I trust and say, let me send this to you and tell me what you think. You know, boxers that had to pay Mick Hennessy 30% of everything. Everything. You know, those deals could roll over. Like, absolutely insane. Some of the deals that people are signing. And no one's pushing back. Like, even though they are the asset, they're not pushing back. It's crazy. But the thing about Dan is, Dan hasn't shipped a lot of punishment as a pro, in my opinion. Like, you know, I mean, hasn't been loads of punishment. He's still sharp. He's still all right. He's still physically in shape. Like, Dan can still go on a good run where he just racks up good wins. But he's got to take ownership of being good. He's got to take ownership of getting the last drop of Dan Aziz out of his career. And that means he's got to get back to what made him good. Those nasty shots, like not full power all the time, but just heavy enough to annoy people. More hand speed, more work rate, stuff that he knows already, that I'm not telling him anything new. But he's got to put that rubber on the road now. But just let me zoom out for a second. Let me just zoom all the way out and not talk about any individual and just talk about boxing at the moment. We are not producing kids that are good enough. Yeah, they're not good technically. They're not tough. They're not strong. They're not powerful. They're not fit. They're not any of these things, right? And that's why we're having to dig up second-rate journeymen from any part of the world for our kids to fight them. They're not very good. I sit and I listen to podcast after podcast where trainers are praised. He's a good trainer. He's an experienced trainer. And then I pause and I go, based on what exactly? Based on what? You know, I was at York Hall on Friday. I saw Tommy Fletcher box. It looked like he didn't want to be in there. When he realized that this kid wasn't going to fall over for him, it looked like he didn't want to be in there because there was a chance he was going to get hit. Tommy Fletcher's 6'7". And like, he can objectively crack. He can punch really, really hard. Why don't you want to get hit? It's boxing. You're going to get hit. Like, show some respect to the sport and accept you're going to get hit. But he doesn't want to get hit. And he boxed like he didn't want to get hit. And he lost. That rebuild is going to take a while now. And the thing about that rebuild is it goes through guys like Alois Jr. It could go through guys like Chamberlain. It could go through guys like Riakpo. It could go through guys like Vidal Riley eventually. If you don't like getting hit, that's the wrong position to be in. I promise you that. But he's not good enough. I had to say about Courts, his performance wasn't good enough. And I've watched a whole load of people this weekend. Performances haven't been good enough. I watched the developments. Performances haven't been good enough. These kids aren't training hard. The training's weak. Their mindsets are weak. And it's because you've got coaches in the sport now that don't understand the sport. They don't understand that the goal of a boxing training session is to break people. The reason why boxing is held in such high esteem is the idea that not everybody can do it. Never mind jumping in the ring and scrapping. Not everyone can do the training sessions 2 times, 3 times, 4 times a week. No one can do the 12 or 15 round bag sessions where you're literally having to prop each other up because everyone is exhausted. You're redlining it. How many gyms, has anyone been to a gym in the last year where the floor was drenched with sweat? Where people at the end of that session were just lying on the floor. No one could talk for about 5 minutes because of where they'd just been to. I haven't. And the reason is you don't have nasty people training anymore. Yeah. Nasty people create nasty environments. And nasty environments are what's needed to win. That's what builds character. We don't have them. You go to GB, it's all very friendly, all very pally, all collegiate. Look at them, they all take pictures together and smile, and they go on these tournaments. It's like boys and girls on tour, and it's all smiles and stuff. And I hate that. I hate that because at some point soon you're going to be trying to win a medal. Whether it's the Commonwealth Games, the Europeans, the World, and your faces tell me you don't want to. So it's all very nice, and it's all these coaches, and no one wants to offend anyone because the gravy train's kind of nice. You get to travel here, there, and everywhere. And because you're a coach, you ain't got to worry. Like, once you get to Sofia, you can go and be a tourist. It's all good. Once you've done your sessions, you ain't worried about nothing. And you're starting to see it now, right? A lot of these guys are getting into their 30s now as boxers. And they're going to guys like Joe Gallagher, and they're going to guys like Adam Booth, because these young guys, they ain't got it. They ain't got that. That thing that says, I know what your real breaking point is. Don't listen to your PT. Don't listen to your strength and conditioning guy that's talking about overtraining. If the load I'm giving you causes you to overtrain, you shouldn't be boxing. You're not built to box. And so our sport's rotten. Yeah? I would argue 80% of trainers are not fit for purpose. And that's why 80% of our boxers are not fit for purpose. Amateur and pro, they're not fit for purpose. That's why people aren't buying tickets. That's why people aren't sponsoring anymore, because they're realizing these kids aren't tough. If I ran a scaffold company, I wouldn't sponsor a kid that couldn't do a month working for me. I wouldn't. If I ran who are the people who do the pipes? I know you said not Thames Water, but you know the guys that dig the trenches. Yeah, because there's clean water pipes and there's dirty water pipes. The guys do the dirty water pipes. You can't do a month of that. Why should they sponsor you? You can't hod carry for a month. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't have people who are durable anymore, because the amateurs allow you to be a bit soft and people care too much. It's like, oh, don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. But what it's done over the last probably 10 years for sure is It's softened our boxers up. And I'm going to give you an example of this. You see, when Joshua won the gold medal and people saw what it did for Finchley, this is what happened. Everyone went and found a project heavyweight, right? That's why you have a glut of heavyweights at the moment. You just have a load of shit heavyweights, right? Just big lumps that they've dug up, no experience, never boxed before, but everyone believes if I put you in a microwave for 45 minutes, you'll be ready to go, right? No earning your stripes, no learning the core tenets of boxing, none of this. And it's like, right, go and find him a deal, wheel him out. And you wonder why our boxing is shit in this country, why we watch it and bang our heads and go, that's just like a doorman jumping out to box. Because that's what Joshua started. He started the idea of, and I don't blame him, but you got to attach his name to it, the Project Boxer. Okay? So Joshua started the idea of a Project Boxer. It started with the heavyweights, and then people started to shuffle down the weights to see if they could find someone on the white collar scene that they could flip into a boxer. It hasn't really worked apart from Fabio Wardley. And even at that point, we still got to say he's British level, right? He hasn't really elevated above that. So the next thing that happened was the race to GB. So all the coaches wanted to be part of GB because like I could get a few quid and a few tracksuits doing this. Woo, hoo, 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 hoo. And so all the dick eating and all that sort of stuff started at that point. And that's when you started to see people get that really annoying style that you see in the amateurs, hopping in and out with that loose kind of lead swinging arm that the GB lot were doing a lot of, right? Because it was like, that's what you needed to do to get into GB. And anyone that was preaching anything outside of that was a heretic, like me. Right? They weren't teaching body shots. They weren't teaching combination punching. They weren't teaching you to come forward. It was always retreat, retreat, retreat. And you're seeing this now amongst our boxers. You weren't teaching people to dog it out. And when you found out your boxers were training with pros or sparring with pros, you threw your toys at the pram and cried. But what that was doing was toughening them up. So that when they do turn pro, it's not a surprise. Just like in America, the amateurs spar with pros as early as they can. You want to know a good example of sparring with pros early in your amateur career? A really good example? Liam Cameron. That's a great example. That's why he's unbreakable now. So we've had this for over a decade now. The idea of the Project Boxer, the idea of just getting your kids into GB because somehow that validates you as a coach. And so we've done that. And in that GB system, you're around your mates, guys that you did the schoolboys with, guys that you did the juniors with, might have done a few box cups with them. You're around your mates. You get to live like students, basically. And it's all very comfortable. And it's easy. I've seen the workouts they do. They're easy. It's just that they do a lot of them in a short space of time. But they're easy workouts. There's no real skill development. They don't build toughness. They don't build resilience. They don't teach these kids to actually box from a technical, tactical, and mental perspective. They don't do anything. So you can spend 4 or 5 years in GB. Look at Fraser Clark. Fraser Clark. I nearly fell into the Curtis Woodhouse trap. Fraser Clark is not an elite boxer. He's an elite amateur, but he's not an elite boxer. He doesn't have a lot of tools. He was in that system from when he was like 21. He doesn't have a lot of tools. You sparred everyone. You have no tools. You have no tools, no ring craft, no nous. You can't navigate stuff. If you can't blast through someone's front door, you've got nothing else. You know? What makes Fraser Clark any different from Johnny Fisher? Johnny Fisher's the same guy. If Johnny can blast through those front doors, it's easy for him. If he can't, it's a bit harder. But he came from playing rugby at university. I understand why he's in his situation, but why is Fraser? Look at all these guys like Chef Clark, and I've got nothing against them, but they don't have nous and they don't have ring craft. I'm sure guys like Mullins are there right now teaching him these things. And it's like, well, shouldn't you already have some of this? And you saw it when guys like Boatsi, etc., all turned pro. Fowler turned pro. Anthony Fowler, I think he was 2010 and 2014 ABA champion. Anthony Fowler is one of the best amateurs we've had for the last 25 years. As an amateur, you put him in that kind of company like your George Groveses, your Joe Selkirks, etc., right? That's a name I haven't said in a long time. But you put him in that kind of category. He's a class amateur. His pro career was not what it should have been. Like, if only he'd been as good at boxing as he was at selling CBD. But that's because of GB. So you look at all of this and you go, actually, GB is a curse. It takes everything that makes you good and replaces it with everything that makes you bad. And that's why you haven't seen anyone apart from Joshua, maybe Luke Campbell, come out of that GB system and be good for a sustained period of time. I know people talk about Josh Taylor. But he just had, that's a really odd career where he shone really bright really quickly and then that was it. And we've never really got to the bottom of why, but you imagine there's some lifestyle issues around that. But GB's become this curse because every coach is obsessed with getting their kids a GB tracksuit. And look, I was like that for a bit until I realized there's no real value in it. Those 3 years you spend away would be better off in rings with guys who are doing it right now, with the pros who are doing it right now, getting comfortable with those sorts of tactics, understanding how to deal with all of that stuff, which we should be teaching because if we're good coaches, we should know. But like I said, most coaches are a mix of frustrated dad, PE teacher, personal trainer, social worker, right? That's what most trainers are now, just a mix of any of those elements. And so they don't really understand what they're doing and why. They just don't. And that's why our boxers are the way they are. That's why our boxers are soft. That's why our boxers don't go very far when they come up against people who genuinely are tough, who are brave, who are willing to go to those dark places. Because you don't know you're willing to go to those dark places until you go there. And you got to do it in training first. And when I talk to promoters and I talk to managers and I talk to all of these guys in the game and I say, until you guys are demanding excellence from boxers, you're not going to get excellence. You know, if you've ever trained with me, you'll know I have this rule and I go, 0 errors. That's what we start with. Make no errors. And then let's start building from there. And if you keep making errors at some point, you're going to get that day of reckoning. And it'll be like, do you really want to stick around it and learn or not? But we're in a very, very dark place boxing-wise because we don't have good enough coaches. Like, it's really, really dire right now. And you got to think what you're asking people to do. You're asking people to give up 2 or 3 nights of their week. And most people have families and stuff. You're asking people to give up 2 or 3 nights of their week to deal with a bunch of unmotivated kids that when you make them train hard, their parents complain or other people complain and say you can't make them do that. I don't blame people for stepping away from boxing now. So how do you fix all of this? You can't fix it until people start just calling out the BS that happens in gyms. Like a good person who I imagine could do this is Ebony Bridges. I'm sure she could call out the BS she's seen in gyms. There are loads of boxers that could do it and go, look, I was in this gym, this is what they made us do. Wasn't acceptable. But no one does. So you know what? People get to keep their reputations. As inflated as they are, they get to keep their reputations. I keep saying it. This is why Ben Davison is able to walk into a sport and dominate. Because he realized when he looked around, these guys aren't very good, not very knowledgeable, just very mediocre. And he chose not to be. That's the difference. But we are in a crisis. And at the beginning of this pod, I referenced the end of an era. And like OD is probably the first soldier to fall from this era. But if you look at it, Aziz, Yard, Richards, Boatsi, Joshua, Fury, Eubank, Lee Wood, Warrington. Like there's a load of guys who in 2 years' time shouldn't be boxing, right? Because they're probably retired and they'd be comfortable. And a lot that come after them, loads of red flags around them. Just loads of red flags around them. We put Billum Smith in that list as well. Riakporhe can go in there. Or Cody can go in there. There's a long list of boxers who probably have 2 or 3 years left. And we don't have replacements for them. And if we started today, the replacements we'd have would be ready in about 6 or 7 years. Slim pickings on their way, my friends. Slim pickings on their way. But there's nothing we can do. Until people start calling out the BS in boxing, there's nothing we can do. The board should be stricter on this. The board should be asking real questions about, you shouldn't have to memorize the damn rule book. Like, there should be questions about being a coach. Can you coach somebody? What do you believe in? What are your values? Give us a case study. Yeah, give us confidence you know what the hell you're doing. I can memorize that rule book if I need to. But those case studies you can't fake because people are going to ask you questions and you better have those answers. And I say this at a time when one thing does put a smile on my face. And it's the fact that I think more people are hitting things and hitting people than we've seen in a long, long time. So that's a good thing. We just need to make sure they're doing the right things in the right way. This should be the hardest sport on earth. Professional boxing should be so savage, only a handful of people want to go through the hell required to be good at it. We've made it too easy. Kids are coming from rugby to box. People are coming from white collar to box. People are coming from Muay Thai, kickboxing to box, and everyone's just talking them up. And I'm like, well, how low must the bar be for these people to be confident they can do something in the sport? Guys turning pro at 33. You shouldn't be able to. Your body shouldn't be able to cope with it if you're training properly. But that lets you know the rot's setting. But look, I'm going to stop now before I start dampening your mood. If you're walking, if you're cycling, whatever. But that definitely went on longer than I planned, so apologies for that. Let me tap out now. Go enjoy the rest of my day. Take care.